How are you, tea family? All right, okay, tea family, class is officially in session. We just heard the bell ring and everything. I know you don't know that, but my handy dandy sister and I definitely heard that bell. So I have a confession. I don't think we have ever really learned enough about tea. And I'm not talking about what temperature to brew, how long to steep, or anything like that. We've talked about those things, but today I want to have a little more fun because tea has lots of stories and started arguments, traveled around the world, influenced history, and completely changed cultures. So, some of the things that I wanted to talk about today, I want I want to talk about because I think they're downright fascinating, but also give us another look while we do our question and answer. So this is a live tea Q&A, which means please put your questions and comments in the chat or comment box, depending on which platform you want. Also, say hello and let us know what kind of tea you're drinking or what you're drinking for a beverage tonight. My handy dandy assistant is not really drinking anything that I can see over there. I will be drinking some Emerald Garden in just a minute. But today, I want to do something and talk about things that you've always wondered about. Maybe a question that you've always wanted to ask, but you're like, surely everybody else knows this. We're going to take it for granted that nobody knows anything. So if you're watching the replay on this, don't worry. You can still enter your comments or questions in the chat. I do go back and watch them and answer them. And even I'm going to throw some questions at you this evening. I want to see how many answers you're able to get correct. So grab your tea. Class is starting. Not really, but we're going to start our chatting with an easy one. I'm going to start off with a question. So what do these all have in common? Green tea, black tea, oolong, white tea, pu'er, pu'er. I always forget how to say that one. Sorry. All right, put in the chat or the comments. Handy dandy assistant will help me watch everything. Meanwhile, I am going to make some Emerald Garden, give you a chance to answer. And there we have just a blend of green teas, something really, really simple. I do a lot of black teas because I do favor black teas for the most part. So I wanted to do some green tea today. And we're just going to kind of put that over. And we only need 1 minute on the clock, please, handy dandy assistant, because this is a green tea. It does not have any freeze-dried fruit. I'll get it. It does not have any freeze-dried fruit in it. Therefore, and of course, I just had it on my timer on something really longer. All right. It doesn't need that extra minute to rehydrate that fruit and bring that fruitiness out. So just a 1 minute on the first brew. Of course, with 3 brews, it's 2 minutes on the second brew, 3 minutes on the third brew. Hello, Diane. She's having some hot peach berry. That's awesome. I looked at that one, but then I didn't want to tease people who didn't have an opportunity. They weren't with us during that live to get that tea. So enter in the comments what all those teas have in common. I gave you a chance, so we're going to go ahead and get started. They all come from one plant, Camellia sinensis. That is the true tea plant. The difference is largely in what happens to the tea leaves after they've been harvested, including processing, oxidation. Your cup of green tea and your black tea aren't coming from 2 different plants. They are the same plant. They're not cousins. They're more like siblings. And I know I say this before, but I always want to emphasize it because this is a question that we get all the time. And that's how quick a 1 minute can come up when you're brewing Emerald Garden. You'll see how much bigger that is right there if you look. And there we are. Some delicious hot Emerald Garden ready to go. That's one of those things, if you're ever in a rush, a simple green tea that doesn't have the freeze-dried fruit in it, so it only needs 1 minute to brew, that is a pretty quick tea that you can have in the morning if you are in a rush. Okay, so how about this question? I warned you, I'm going to ask some questions and you can ask me questions because it's our Q&A, but what is the first tea or type of tea that you remember drinking. So was it a sweet tea? Was it tea from grandma? Was it an iced tea? And if you're from New England, you understand the difference between that and just a cold tea. Was it a tea bag? Was it something more adventurous? Okay, let me know. What was that first type of tea that you remember drinking? And if you're really brave, how old were you when it happened? So Handy Dandy Assistant said tea bag, which would have been like a Tetley or a Salada tea bag, where we're from. Salada. See, I knew it. That's just because that's a very New England tea blend from the supermarket. And how old were you, young man? That's a lot of tea. And how old were you when you had your first tea that you remember? In the 70s. Okay. Diane says it was a Lipton tea bag. It could have been Lipton. Lipton was another one that's very popular up there. Although Salada and Tetley were really number one and number two. Diane, do you remember how old you were? I often share the story of Nona's, in that my love for tea came from my grandparents. I grew up drinking tea from a like toddler age, I know. However, I remember 5 or 6 years old, and it was an English breakfast tea that my grandparents had, and that is now we have discovered is almost the exact same flavor as our Highland Dawn tea, which took me a minute. So there's my answer to the question. Uh, I always love kind of finding out what that initial tea was. First time you remember drinking tea, how old were you? What kind of tea? It is typically a bagged tea, a supermarket bagged tea that most people remember. And Kim is drinking water tonight. That's always a good thing to drink in the summer. I'm going to take this should be cool enough. For those that missed it, I am drinking Emerald Garden tonight. Something just simple, quick, and easy. There's the color. Trying not to spill it all over my desk while I chat. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to bring in here a little bit is kind of a back to school kind of thing, because I know most of the people around us have already gone back to school. Diane, have you gone back to school yet? No, she wouldn't have. She might be back to school, but the kids don't come in until the Wednesday after Labor Day, unless things have changed from when in Massachusetts, children do not go back to school until the Wednesday after Labor Day, FYI. I know that those that are in Texas that started around the 1st or 2nd of August, or what would have that been, the 3rd of August, who've already been back almost a month, they're going to be very sad about that, if that was them. But it works out. I like the longer summer, but it goes longer in the spring. Okay, so if you could create a class called T101, what would the very first lesson be? How to brew tea, tea history, tea and food, how is tea grown, how to ruin a perfectly good cup of tea. Okay, maybe that wouldn't be one. Next Monday for Diane and the kids, Wednesday. Yeah, that's not fun. Diane, I feel like we missed summer. I really feel like we missed summer. I was telling some of my friends that on Saturday. Like, I feel like we missed it. We've been busy. Okay. I would not necessarily say that we want to have a class on how to ruin a perfectly good cup of tea, but a lot of people don't mean to, and they just don't know the basics, and they accidentally ruin a really good cup of tea. Okay, so where tea gets interesting is for centuries, tea wasn't really something that you would drink. It would communicate hospitality. It was part of social gatherings. It was connected to religion and philosophy, political controversy, but it was a lot of times a gift, and you would drink it, yes, but tea was much more about so many things in world history. We all know about the role that it played in American history or US history with the Boston Tea Party, which was 1773. Now I have to think. I want to say it was Boston Tea Party. Here we go. Google's going to be my friend. What year was the Boston Tea Party? I want to say it was 1773, everybody. It was not it was 1773. Look at that. The brain cells are working right now. There you go. You would say, so Kim's Tea 101 would start off with what temperature to brew each kind of tea? That is an excellent place to start because so many people burn a green tea without realizing what they're doing, or even more delicate white teas. And Diane's telling me they've been starting before Labor Day for years now. That makes me sad for you. Oh, well. It used to be okay. It's been a minute, but it used to be you'd start the Wednesday after Labor Day, and then you would go through the middle-ish of June for everybody except for the senior class. Where I went to high school, the senior class always got out like a week or two earlier than everybody else. And then the juniors got to think they were hot stuff for a couple of weeks because they became the seniors. So there you go. There you go. All right, let's see. Kim has shocked coworkers, probably with the tea, the water temperatures and things like that. Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, so let me go here. Okay. Again, if you have any questions or anything you want me to answer, feel free to put that in there. Otherwise, I'm just going to chat about another way to potentially impress someone at your next dinner party. Well, we still have dinner parties every once in a while. So, or the next time you have friends over, why do some languages call it tea? Others call it chai. Others call it cha. And that is different. I know that languages, you pronounce the same word differently, but it's interesting because you would think that if it's a name, for instance, I always thought that if the capital of Spain was when the capital of Spain was Toledo, that everybody would pronounce that word Toledo, but that's not how it is. You have the differences. And this language pronounces the capital this, and this pronounces the capital the same word, but they pronounce it differently, or they make a new word, and that's always interesting to me. And the same thing happens with tea. As it connected around the world, they kind of had that word that they would use, but then it kind of became part of the language. And as words become part of the language, they change. And languages that are still alive create new words for the same thing. So it is, whether they're talking chai or tea or cha, we're still all talking about the same thing. I do find it interesting though, and I do know it frustrates other people. I just make a giggle out of it to myself, where people want some chai tea, and then if they understand that chai means tea, they're asking for some tea, which is always kind of fun, but it's just a cultural thing that we don't always realize that chai and tea actually are the same word, just different languages. So, little linguistic souvenirs for the day is what I'm sharing today. But all right, now I know I've talked about some of the history and different things like that, but I do want to chat a little bit, because sometimes people will ask about the modern tea bag, and no, I don't have one to show you. Mostly because our tea bags are not the ones that I'd be referring to, and I think we dumped. Sorry, there's turkeys walking across my yard, and it distracted me. There's like a whole gaggle of 24 or so with babies crossing my yard, and it's very distracting right here. Okay. So the modern tea bag. Did people actually invent it? Has it been there all along? Well, the popular origin story is highly debated. The historical account commonly credits New York tea merchant Thomas Sullivan with the early tea bag samples in 1904. However, there are others that stories that also claim that they came up with this before, after, etc. Most of history will credit Thomas Sullivan in New York with 1904. However, it was always so that they could use all of it, right? And we've talked about how tea is it comes through a series of sieves. You have that sieves. You have that perfect tea leaf that is unbroken, that's been handpicked, and it's like the best of the best. And then you have ones that are just slightly broken, and then you have ones that are partially broken, and then you have ones that are just broken, they're pieces, and then it keeps going down and filters, so you have that dust or the fannings at the bottom, and those are the ones that are super high in caffeine, extraordinarily high in tannic acid, and most of what you'll find in grocery store and supermarket tea bags, which is why so many people think that tea has to be bitter, and we all know that it doesn't. But that's why, because people are trying to make that profit out of everything. So they would take the fannings and they would put it in there. And then a lot of people like that super high caffeine. And there are people that like that bitter flavor. And rather than just making a stronger cup of tea, they wanted the extra caffeine. And so it is not always something that people don't like. Most people don't like it though. So, all right, let's see. I did have a question that was sent in this week or actually last week, and it was, what tea would I take camping? All of them, if I could. But we don't have that much room when we go camping, so we primarily take Serene Sunrise. It's my favorite, so you're going to get me to choose that one. A lot of times we will choose Maiden's Blush or Ruby Chai for an evening if we want something caffeine free. Mostly because I'm also not a mint person, hence the reason why I'm not drinking a green mint tonight. I really wanted to, but the next time you always know that if I brew up a mint tea in front of you, my handy dandy assistant is actually the one that is going to end up drinking it, not me. I'm just not a mint person. Sorry, everybody. Have I tried it? Yes. When I'm balancing a tea blend, if it has mint in it, I will just make atrocious faces because it's not my favorite, but I still am looking to have that balance and not be overpowering. So I really like Maiden's Blush because it is so delicious and it doesn't need a sweetener and it doesn't have the caffeine in it. I do know that there is a member of our tea family from New Hampshire who absolutely loves Summer Butterfly. And she swears that is the best tea that we've ever created because she loves it iced. She does it a cold brew and then leaves it iced. I have to say, I really do kind of like our K-State blend, the All Hail Kansas, our tribute to K-State University, because it's got some fruitiness, but it has some things. But I will just pretty much, when I go camping, whatever's going to strike my fancy. I typically will start with Serene Sunrise, but there have been times that I've chosen, I didn't feel like it, I brought Highland Dawn or Morning Irish, or other times where I want harmony with the strawberry and a little bit of the orange zest and the green tea. Ancient Green Dragon is another popular one. So you could take whatever tea you like when you go camping. You don't have to think there's only one tea for camping. It's pretty much whatever you would like. I like having a variety. It is not uncommon for there be 4 or 5 different ones in the camper when we go camping. I do, Diane. I like really like that one. I'm glad you like it too. First of all, I was super excited when I finally got the right purple, because the purple is an important part of that tea. However, I do love the way that one blends. It's one of those things. Okay, what is the strangest tea combination I have ever tried? Well, this is kind of a hard one. I don't always try the super strange ones, because a lot of times they'll put things like spices in there. And since I do have some food allergies and intolerances, I have to be super careful. Hence the reason why everything is listed on our packages, because I ran into so many people who appreciate that. Uh, I want to say it was a black tea, but it had a lot of herbs in it that I didn't even necessarily recognize. Not even, there are certain flowers and herbs like calendula and things like that. You don't hear of them every day. They're out there. Uh, Goldenrod is another one. I know it causes allergies, but a lot of people drink a goldenrod tea or use a goldenrod honey because it actually helps with the allergies, things like that. So those are kind of more unusual. But I would have to say there was one, and it had black tea, birch bark. Oh, what else did it have? It had a bunch of herbals that I didn't recognize. That was probably the strangest combination I had ever tried. It was not my favorite. It wasn't horrible. It was not horrible, but it wasn't my favorite. So, uh, there you go. What? Okay, I'm trying to scroll down on my list really quickly and look. Why does one tea smell completely different from another? Okay, I love this question. This was one that I'm going to answer very simply. First of all, remember we talked about how like green tea is processed and oxidized different from a black tea. So a black tea, you're going to get more malty notes and more of a robust, bold aroma to the nose, whereas the green tea, you're going to have more of a grassy or herbal notes. That has to do with processing and different things like that. However, there are certain, even in among the green teas, it is how they're processed, but it's also where they're grown. A jasmine green tea, so the green tea leaves have either been packed with jasmine flowers overnight and they kind of take on, so that's going to give kind of a floral note, a jasmine-y floral note. However, you also have teas that are grown in certain areas where there are certain, like jasmine flowers are in bloom there, or they've got kind of a floral note because maybe that tea is grown fairly close to where wildflowers are grown or certain kinds of flowers are grown. And then the bees and your pollinators are coming back and forth and mixing it, and the aroma, the tea leaves will pick up some of the aroma. One of the fun things that I did, we were at an event last fall. We were at a chocolate event where we had our chocolate tea. That's what it was. And a couple of the people that were attending actually came over and they were trying teas, and they tried one of our blends, Highland Dawn. I want to say, no, one of our tea blends. They tried one of our tea blends that has the Yunnan in it, and they could pick it up because they were actually from Kenya. And they said, oh, they could tell that it was grown near this floral plant because they could smell and taste it in the tea. And so those are some of the reasons why it's going to smell differently. Now, obviously, you have what else is in the tea blend. You can have a tea blend that has just all different kinds of tea leaves in it. You can also have one that has fruit in it or peppermint or herbs, and that's all going to change different things. But I wanted to kind of talk about that because that is fun to think about how many things kind of influence those tea leaves as they go in there and bring the flavor. Okay, what tea would I serve at a wedding? Well, I urge you to think about getting a custom tea for your wedding, but you could serve anything. It depends. If you're going to do it with coffee at the end of, say, the food service and you're having a more formal wedding, then you're probably going to want to go with a typical black tea. I would be definitely recommending Highland Dawn because it has that little bit of sweetness to it. You don't want that too much of a bitter taste. However, if you are having a less formal and you're having like a lot of iced teas and different things like that, then I would like move into some of the other ones. I would move into Maiden's Blush. That's one of my favorite cold teas. Emerald Garden is also really, really good, cold, incredible flavor, different things like that. It depends also on what kind of foods you're serving. If you don't want to go with the traditional black tea, if you want to do something else, if you're having a lot of spicy foods, then you want to probably be in more of the green tea or somewhat of a sweeter tea to kind of balance. So there's lots of different things. Think of it like any other meal that you're doing a food and tea pairing for. But most people are going to anticipate that black tea at the end, surprise them with having something that has a hint of sweetness like our Highland Dawn. I mean, sweet tea, I'm going to go straight up breakfast blend. If I'm making a sweet tea, I'm doing straight up breakfast blend. So, all right. I've answered some questions for a second. Now I'm going to ask you another question. What is the strangest thing you've learned about tea? Of all the things you now know about tea. In fact, I asked a question earlier today on our social media, and what my question was, what have you learned about tea, or what's something unique you've learned about tea in the last 5 years, just to kind of get an idea of there, because it struck me kind of fun as a fun question to ask earlier today, and I've gotten some great answers. I really love them. It lets us know what you hear when we share information and what you are missing necessarily, things like that. But so what is the strangest thing you've learned about tea? I know for me, I mean, if everybody else will put it in the chat or comments, and Rich, if you want to answer, you can answer too. I always forget how many generations or how many centuries people have been enjoying tea. I forget how long it's been with us. And that's always a fun thing to think about, is a connection with the past, a connection with the future. I love that part. And so that is one thing. Tea is just delicious. And I think that's one of the reasons why it survives so long. But then there's that piece of how it's changed in flavors and the different combinations, but yet at the same point, some of it hasn't changed at all. A lot of our specialty teas are still the same flavors that have been enjoyed for generations. So, all right.
Flavor combinations.
There are a lot of flavor combinations. So let's talk about that for a second. Flavor combinations, you just reminded me. I do want to say Harmony is coming off the website tonight. And so if you want any of that, let me know. And then the other is that Summer Butterfly is going to end the end of August. So if you have an order for that you want to get in, now is the time to get those in. We will be doing a very limited offering of our Pumpkin Kiss, both the caffeine and the caffeine-free blends of that. Pumpkin time, excuse me, pumpkin time. Thank you, honey. I have a note here that about Summer Kiss is also ending the end of the month, and yeah, too many things. Read the brain. So, okay, question for you all in the chat or comments. If you're stranded somewhere and you can only have one type of tea for the rest of your life, what are you choosing? And I love when people try and call me during these. And I'm talking like a black tea, a white tea, an oolong, a Darjeeling, an herbal, caffeine-free, something else. What is it? If you can only have one type of tea for forevermore, what would it be? I think I'm just too attached to my serene sunrise to choose anything other than black tea. Handy dandy assistant, what would you choose? A black tea? Okay. Okay. I mean, I would be happy with the others too. It is. It's just how it's processed. So in the chat or comments, let me know what group of teas would you have? If you could only drink one type of tea for the rest of your life, what would you choose? I'm definitely going to go with the black tea. Diane's with me, black tea. Oh, Kim's trying to make it easy on herself so she doesn't have to choose. She's like, I just picked Nona's tea. I love that. Thank you. I love how you tried to avoid that question. She's sucking up to the teacher. I'm not teaching today. All right, cool. That's awesome. That is awesome. I absolutely love it. I'm really good with that kind of an answer too, because sometimes I just can't choose. Yeah. Like, what's a favorite color? Well, I like this color, but I also really like this color. I don't know. It depends on the moment. So, all right. Okay, that is what I wanted to kind of chat about today. Answer those questions that we have. And I think I have one more. Let me just check. Nope. I answered all the questions that came in today. But thanks for joining me. And let me look. I have to look at my calendar and see what are we doing next week. Next week we are going to be talking about appealing. It is almost time to for appealing to come back out. So Kim says, if I can't pick Nona's, I guess green, but choosing is so hard. I agree. It's hard to make those kind of choices sometimes. But next week we are going to be talking about appealing, because appealing starts in the beginning of September. Believe it or not, we are almost in September. That's kind of freaking me out just a little bit. Definitely behind on our summer duties, but that's what we will be talking about next week. So if you have any other questions during the week, of course, you can always just reach out and ask them. We're not going to say no. I love being able to answer your questions. Other than that, I hope everybody has a wonderful week, and I'll see you all next Monday. We'll see y'all later.